Have you guys heard of this thing, COVID? It's been around for a while. Is there any acknowledgement to this thing that's been going on, this COVID thing?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Yeah.
I don't know anything about
New
it, but
virus,
I heard my neighbour talking about it the other day. I'm like, what is this thing? I mean, I've heard nothing of it. So I thought it might be worth investigating. From the University of Auckland, Dr. Anna Brooks is joining us. Oh, I've got to find my mouse. Sorry, Anna. There we go. Morning, Anna.
Morning.
Hey, thank you so much. Yes, sorry. We've moved our time for a week to see what it's like. And so, yes, it's afternoon, Anna. People will think we're just fudging the live stream, Jeremy. But thank you for joining us. The reason we've brought you on is to talk about the leak from within the ministry about COVID, specifically mask wearing in schools. Now, I have a personal, I nearly said vendetta. No, I have a personal interest in this because I have 2 children currently at school. I won't even say their ages because I do not want to identify any part of the schools, but 2 different levels of schools. And at the end of last term, both schools informed us that they were no longer going to enforce the mask mandate. And then both schools are also going, but it's highly recommended you wear one, but we're not going to enforce it. The reason it's a bit rawer for me right now, without getting too dramatic, is I have one of my 2 children upstairs in their bedroom with a headache and a sore throat. And the school that the child is at, and I know I'm not being a soccer mom here, but my children are very responsible. They're wearing their masks at all time, other than when they're eating and outside. But I learned the other day that the school that one of my children who's upstairs is at is having their kids have their lunches inside. So all the kids that are wearing masks are then exposed to all the kids who aren't wearing masks inside to have their lunch. So I feel like for me, there's a bit of a structural letdown at the moment. So my kids are doing the right thing, we're doing the right thing, but there's a situation around them that I feel like if, for example, and she tested negative this morning, but if she tested positive for COVID, which is sort of what we're expecting, so that's how we're preparing ourselves at the moment, then it's the structures that have let her down, not what she, as a not yet teenager, is being responsible to a really high degree, actually. So just some background as to why I have a bit of skin in this game, more so than many. Look, before we get into the leaked email, is there anything you want to jump in with, Anna? You're the expert here as to what I've just said, or the situation in general.
Well, yeah, I think so. So we, a bunch of us, COVID peeps, got together because we were also alarmed about this. As soon as Orange was coming up, and that meant woohoo, COVID was over. COVID was over, no more masking and all the rest of it. That was alarming because we have low rates of vaccination in children, and kids go to school and congregate and get exposed, and then kids bring COVID home and all the rest of it. And plus also, just we don't want widespread infection in children. We still don't know the long-term impacts. So obviously, one of the areas I work in is understanding what this virus does when we get infected. And it's not looking rosy, right? So we want to limit infections. So we were totally alarmed by this happening as well, that, that schools weren't going to be required to mask, or children weren't required to mask in schools. So we wish that the language was stronger there, and, even required, not strongly encouraged or whatever. So what we were mostly alarmed about here was the inequities, because it was handed to the schools to decide themselves. And as you've described, your child might be masking, or they might tell you they're masking. That happens too. Kids will do that as well. Yes, mum and dad, I'm masking at school, and maybe they're not, because children are children, peer pressure.
Yeah.
If most people aren't masking, that's going to happen too. So, that's happened in my immediate family as well, where that's, yes, a child's brought home COVID, and the understanding was that there was masking at school, and there just wasn't. So,
Jeremy, Jeremy, I just want to jump on one more thing. If you want to jump in before I go to this email, you can pick whether you want to go or not, Jeremy. But the thing that I want to make really clear as well, Anna, to people who are watching, is what the schools are doing. Some of the schools, because there are still some who are enforcing masks. Yeah. What the schools are doing is saying we're following ministry advice. However, what it seems is that the ministry is not following the epidemiologists' advice. So rather than the schools going, we're following the epidemiologists' advice, they're following what's fast seeming to become more political. And I want to add as well, the principals who are saying, and I've seen this in writing, we're not the health experts, so we can't make these decisions, so we're following the health experts. What they're actually doing is they're actually kicking the can down the road, and they're making the 12-year-olds the health experts.
Yes.
So the principals are absolving themselves of responsibility and forcing the 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, 15-year-olds to be the ones that ultimately are making a health decision while we're in a fucking pandemic.
But should it be schools that make healthcare decisions as well? No. So that's where we're coming from. That it shouldn't be each school making a public health decision. The advice and recommendation should absolutely be coming from ministry, and we just felt that language needed to be stronger, right? So that because otherwise it's which principal who is instilling what they believe, because ultimately that's what it comes down to, right? It's going to be board of trustees or however each independent school's governed, and so it's a postcode lottery whether your child is protected at school, isn't it?
Can I ask? Sorry, Anna, can I ask, you quite rightfully bring up the information and the education. Are we still suffering a little bit of a hangover of the fact that it sort of got thrown around as a hard fact very early in the pandemic, and I'm talking about the first variant, and even Delta to a certain degree. There was sort of this feeling that kids didn't get it.
Yes, that was exactly.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually said out loud that children get it, or if they get it, it's it's very mild. But that's simply not the case with Omicron, is it?
Exactly, and so that has changed. So you're right, like it was referred to that children aren't as impacted as adults, and that was true. And as you say, even with Delta. But, we didn't have enough training, like as in, New Zealand didn't have enough time, and the world didn't have enough time to understand what the impacts of these new variants were on children. And essentially what happened in New Zealand is Omicron hit here, only a few, not long after it hit the UK. And so everyone's like, is this the same? And so all we had to go on is what was happening internationally at only a month before, or very close behind. So, and we were absolutely hearing, and again, it's all anecdotal because there's no time for research, but we were hearing more and more kids were getting sick, and we were hearing more kids were getting hospitalized and things like that. But on top of that, the big difference between the UK and here is we had a vaccination. Our children here were going to be vaccinated. In the UK, they were still slow, but the other comparison we make here is that when Delta hit, the adults got locked up, right? Lock them up and vaccinate them safely. Then Omicron hit, and we threw the children out to schools in the middle of the pandemic, right? So, and so, yes, I think a lot of it was that hangover, as you say, from, children will bounce back, they're less impacted. And largely that's still the case, that many little ones will, have it mildly, but certainly some are really getting kicked by this virus, and some will have long-term impacts. We just know that on the whole, children are less impacted by infection, but that doesn't mean that we should use the children as, the guinea pigs here. So that's why we're sort of saying, if we don't know the long-term impacts, should we be testing it on our younger generation? So that's what we were pushing for.
Let's have a look at this leaked ministry email now. So this has come from within the ministry. A senior data analyst is the person who is said to have sent this. It's been seen by Newsroom, and they've written a story on it. A data analyst within the Ministry of Education has gone rogue, calling for a reinstatement of school mask mandate. In an email, the government disavows. Now, we talked a bit about this yesterday, so we won't go too much at it, but the government is being accused of being asleep at the wheel when it comes to protecting children from COVID-19 in an internal email obtained by Newsroom. I will read some of this out because this has some of the details, and then this links back to you, Anna, the article as well, and what you guys are doing. The leak of the message comes after 150 New Zealand scientists and health professionals signed an open letter to the government calling on it to reinstate the school mask mandate and implement other protections in schools. The letter was signed by some of the most prominent independent voices in New Zealand's COVID-19 response, including University of Otago epidemiologist Michael Baker, University of Otago microbiologist Susie Wiles, and University of Auckland paediatrician Jen Russell. You have not asked specifically for more advice on the matter of masks in schools, but the matter is too urgent and critical to wait for a request. The official, who holds a senior role as a data analyst, wrote in the message viewed by Newsroom. The email had the subject line COVID-19 asleep at the wheel. I strongly support the contents of the letter signed by 150 New Zealand scientists and doctors and the call from the Disability Rights Commissioner urging us to reinstate the mask mandate in schools. The analyst wrote that it didn't matter whether Omicron could be completely stopped or whether the mask mandate could be fully enforced. This is the bit that I think the principals need to hear. We still have a responsibility to prevent as many children as possible from being infected and reinfected with SARS-2. It is a dangerous disease whose long-term effects are as yet unknown, and many of our tamariki remain unvaccinated. Without masks, they stand very little protection at all. The email also directly criticised Hipkins' comments on News Hub Nation about each school being able to make its own decision on whether to require masks. It was extremely distressing as an analyst to hear Chris Hipkins admit over the weekend that measures in schools are based on what is popular, not based on evidence. This is not the kind of leadership we should expect or accept from our minister. The analyst concluded by saying it was officials' duty to prevent as much infection and reinfection as possible. If you have decision-making power in this ministry, please use it to protect children. If you do not, please talk to your boss and ask them if this is really what we stand for. Either of you are welcome to jump in.
I'll defer to Anna, but yeah, but I will say, because I mean you've already brought this up, Anna. It's our response to COVID. I think asleep at the wheel is something you can't necessarily accuse this government of being. That's not me defending their decision in this case, but one of the things I think that people, because so much of our response has been quite rapid, people have lost track of the idea that we still don't know anything really about the long-term effects of these illnesses. My father's an epidemiologist, by the way, so the one upside for him of COVID is that people know what that is for the first time in his 40-plus year career. But I mean, that's one of the things well before this that epidemiologists have struggled with, is that people just assume that we know about science, that, okay, we've got a vaccine for this illness, therefore we know what it does. But the truth is, the long-term effects are still, we're only 2 and a bit years into this virus existing.
Exactly.
Yeah, so sorry. I mean, that's just my 2 cents worth, and I'll defer to the expert now. I'll hand over.
well, the key thing here, though, in the letter that we wrote, and it's collected even more signatures, I think we're mid-200s now, is that we're calling for vaccines plus. A vaccine is not a magic bullet, because, that vaccine was developed for, did great against even up to Delta, even though, all the mutations that were happening. But Omicron was a different beast. And, the worst thing that happened when Omicron hit was, Omicron's mild. And it's like, no, Omicron is mild on populations that were either already rampantly infected or vaccinated, or both. And in fact, the research is coming out now absolutely saying that Omicron is no different to OG, original gangster strain. So, and in fact, that's apparently a technical term now, OG, the original variant. So what we're pushing for here is that a vaccine is not a magic bullet. So it absolutely protects against hospitalization. And as you just pointed out as well, the vaccination rates in children are still drastically low. So, these kids in schools, unmasked and surrounded by the waves that are happening, let's be honest, they're going to keep coming. Winter's going to be worse. So what we're calling for as an expert opinion group is sort of saying it's not just vaccines that are going to get us through this. If we start making changes now and normalizing that it's not cool to just spread viruses around everywhere, not just SARS-CoV-2. We're going to get the flu soon. Who knows what our new tourists are bringing in. Like we're going to get RSV, we're going to get flu. And oh my goodness, we've got really, really low vaccine rates in measles vaccination globally, because the focus was on COVID-19 and we were all locked up and what have you. Those viruses don't disappear just because we're locked up. And so we've got all of those things to deal with when we've now got open borders. So we want to start normalizing. Fresh air is a great idea. And even in the context of masking, we all hate constantly being in masks, right? We're not saying this is a great, fun thing to do. It's about protecting thy neighbor. It's about protecting the vulnerable. Why it's so selfish to go, I've had Omicron, that was nothing. Woo, life goes on. It's really selfish to be speaking like that. And the clinically vulnerable person who keeps hearing that COVID's over, or you don't have to wear a mask anymore, what are you doing, is so offensive, because it's saying, I don't care about you anymore, is what that sounds like. So from our perspective, masks are the quick fix. Like, slap that on your face and you're going to stop spitting your germs everywhere. So that's step one, while we start implementing things like what's the air quality like in this building? What's the air quality like in our schools? So the masking's the quick fix to start the new process of normalizing that it's not cool to keep inhaling germs left, right, and center, thinking that that's fine and it's not going to impact us. So that's why we've sort of made this stand, if you like. And so it shouldn't be up to individual schools to make those decisions. And so, we sort of provided this opportunity with our open letter called Vaccine Plus New Zealand, that we are a group of doctors and scientists who are saying that this is a bit rough, guys, that this is rough, that, kids are going to school and with inequities in place. You might be at the school that does everything fantastically, you hardly have infections, and your mate down the road might be the complete opposite. We want it to be normalized that, schools don't have to make this decision. So if they need our letter, or parents need our letter to send to the school and say, where are you getting your advice from? Because these experts say different, then that's kind of why we've done this. I mean, that's also not the ideal situation. But
sorry. I was going to say, it's such utter horseshit as well. The government saying the schools are I spoke to the ministry the other day. I actually received a letter back from them, and they said, I'll bring it up. Have redacted it a bit from the people they sent it, and they said very much the same thing. Schools and Kura know their community, and the best place to make the decision that prioritize the safety and well-being of their students, teachers, and staff, support staff. This includes choosing whether require masks is right for them. So it's literally got nothing to do with the health situation. And I thought, typically the national government will bring in things like bulk funding, where they go, you're responsible for your school stuff. Normally Labor and the left kind of go, we can help do it in a better way by providing, governmental sort of direction on things like that. But in this instance, we're going, no, we're taking our hands off. You guys die for yourself. But in so many other areas, they would never do that within a school. Yeah. Why are they doing that within a school when it comes to public health? It makes, like, when the school would be the least qualified to make those determinations.
Yeah. Exactly. And so, because the way we see it is that education and working are not privileges, they're part of life. So, we're in no way sort of saying, let's put in restrictions. We don't even like the term restrictions. These are protections. So the places where we wanted people to feel safe, vulnerable people, plenty of people can't get vaccinated. Plenty of people are vaccinated, and we can't see if your immune response was good enough, and they may get very sick from this virus. So essentially, in our workplaces, schools, we wanted those protections to remain, especially through the winter. It's just frightening. And let's not forget that, our immunity wanes. So over time, even our healthcare workers were boosted quite some time ago, 3 to 4 months, your new vulnerability creeps in again. And again, our vaccines, don't get me wrong, they're still extremely protective against that severe illness, but it's that immediate immune response that will start to wane away. And so we're more likely to get sick, pass it on, and off we go. And as we're hearing, as we hear more and more information about the new variants, more contagious, and you just say, oh God, when's this going to stop? And the answer is we don't know when it's going to stop, right? And so I guess it's normal human nature to just be over it. We're all over it, right?
And we are.
We're done. But being done, the virus ain't done. It doesn't say, oh, cool, New Zealand's done with me, I'm out. We're in this environment now where our vulnerable populations don't matter, is what this sounds like. Because then it's survival of the fittest, everyone get infected. Because reinfections happen, and people have to understand that just because you got your mild dose of Omicron and woo, I can party now, doesn't mean that the next variant's not going to kick your butt and put you in hospital or give you a long-term condition.
I saw an incredibly unhelpful headline just this morning, actually, which ties into everything you're saying. The headline was Omicron may be less deadly than the flu. I mean, that was the headline. And then in the first sentence of the article, you read, I can't actually remember which news outlet it was on, but it was a local one. The first sentence in the article says, because of our high vaccination rates, and, it throws in all that stuff. It's going, and what it's actually saying is that because we haven't been, necessarily vaccinating as hard against the flu as we have done in the past, because, as you say, quite correctly, the focus has been on COVID, that potentially we could have a worse flu season than we've had an Omicron season. But that doesn't mean the virus is less dangerous. It just means we are dealing with a different society now. We're dealing with a highly vaccinated in adults society. We're dealing with people who haven't been vaccinated, may have built up some immunity because they've already had the damn thing. Yeah, there's so much misleading.
It doesn't count for the next variant, though.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I think what I would say is, going back to that, and it's a great headline grabber, that sentence, asleep at the wheel. The problem is there's so many different hands on the wheel at the moment as well. You've got media, you've got various groups. I mean, I think we're about to talk about the hospitality industry, and which again is basically going, oh, we don't need this isolation period anymore. I mean, come on. I happen to live with someone who is immune compromised, and I completely feel what you're saying, Anna, with that fact that it feels like there's a lot of people going, oh, well, screw you, It's dinosaur thinking. It's just like, well, I'm fine. I'm gonna and to be fair, if I got COVID, I'd probably be okay, but the person I live with would not. So
exactly. And even from the perspective of entertainment industry, hospo, we all care about how it's impacting businesses, but be a business that wants me to come back. Make me feel safe.
100%.
If I see businesses where they're respecting their staff, or okay, we all hate wearing masks, but if the new phase is to monitor your air quality with carbon dioxide monitors, and go, it's probably quite safe in here, then do it. This should be where the pressure sort of starts going, because as winter creeps in, it's starting to get pretty chilly now. We're going to lock ourselves inside. We're going to be all toasty and warm, spreading around COVID, the flu, RSV, all the new favorites that come through. But, and it's a reminder for anyone in a vulnerable situation to go and get your flu vaccine as well. And so what we are sort of fearing, because, we're in the hemisphere that we're coming into winter, and we're sure we were highly vaccinated, and we're waving through Omicron round one, is that nobody knows what Omicron, flu, RSV, boom, all at the same time is going to do. So we know that when we get infected with Omicron, the reason that it kicks some of our butts, as in we get symptoms, we feel rubbish, we're in the bed, even though we're triple vaccinated, that still can happen. It's because it evades the immune system slightly. So it's causing damage. It's giving you a rough time, but you fight it off. What we know about long COVID on that post window after getting infected is that some people take a long time to recover from that. That's why we're sort of saying rest through any symptoms, or, if you feel rubbish, keep resting. But imagine you then got exposed to the flu. you know, and then that kicked your butt. And then, so this is what we're worried about, is that compounding of all our favorite viruses kicking our butts all at the same time, and what that's going to do in our healthcare system, you know, and what that's going to do to children who are now getting, you know, worse symptoms from Omicron, especially if they're not vaccinated and all the rest of it. So we're just worried about sort of creeping into winter when it's the favorite time for these viruses, because, you know, that's why they're seasonal. It's because we're locked inside. It's not because, oh, look, it's winter, I better cruise across to New Zealand. You know what I mean? Like that's what sort of creates the seasonal elements, is because winter is a great time to spread viruses inside.